What's up, it's your boy Undercover, and today I'm going to show you how I made my remix of Candy Shop. I'm going to break down the project, my thought process, which sounds I used, some of the mixing aspect, etc. I'm not going into full detail about the mixing and mastering aspect, but if you want to see that in a future video, just drop a comment below. So without any further ado, let's turn on our speakers, grab our headphones, and dive into the beautiful world of Undercover.
Undercover on the beat, so twerk it, bitch.
Okay guys, so this is the project. I cleaned the project up a bit for you guys because normally my projects are chaotic as fuck. Okay, so the remix immediately starts with the break. Then I go to the build up, the drop, to movement on switch, which I regularly use in my tracks. Then a second break, another build up, and finally the second drop. Okay, so the first thing I did was I downloaded the Candy Shop a cappella.
I take you to the candy shop.
Okay, what I did was I took a regular flute sound and I just copied the original melody from Scott Storch, and I think it's a genius melody that everybody recognizes when they hear it. It sounds something like this.
I take you to the candy shop. I let you lick the lollipop. Go ahead girl, don't you stop. Keep going till you hit the spot. Whoa!
Whoa! Just to fill up the break some more and give it more of a dark vibe, I added a pad. It's a pretty simple pad. I think I called it Mysterious Pad. I'm not sure which pad it is. I think it's a serum pad. I put a pad down pretty low. Let me see, where is it? It's like really low. And I pulled a filter on it so it sounds more in the background. Okay, with the pad it sounds something like this.
Candy shop. I let you lick the lollipop. Go ahead, girl.
Yeah, it gives this mysterious vibe to it, and that's why I call it a Mysterious Pad. So yeah. And then I put this percussion loop in it. With the percussion loop it sounds something like this.
Candy shop.
Yeah.
One more taste of what I got.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple and straightforward percussion loop, and there's a lot of debate over the use of loops because some people think that you're a bad producer because you use full loops without editing them. And in my opinion, if the loop is a small part of your project, then I think you can just put it in, because I can make this loop myself. It's not really a hard loop to make. And if you stumble upon a great loop and it fits in your project and it's a small part of the project, but it just makes it more awesome as a whole, just put that shit in, fam. So the next thing I did was I started with the drop, because when I was thinking about remixing Candy Shop, the first thing I had in mind was the drop. And I wanted the drop to have the same melody as the original Candy Shop, because that's a classic melody everybody knows. But I wanted to switch it up by using a different sound and like a more trap beat. So this is what I started with, and it consists of a few sounds, but I started off with this main lead. Yeah, it's a pretty dirty lead, and I just copied the Candy Shop melody with this sound. And I added some notes just to make it more interesting, like this one and this one, to give it some more vibrato. And if you give... Jesus, gotta be kidding me, toch? Yeah, so this is the melody. Without everything that I put on it in the mixer, it sounds... It's a pretty boring sound. Let's take a look. Yeah, as you can hear, it's a really simple sound. It's a really dry sound, but when I'm making my main melodies, that's what I'm looking for. Very dry sound, because if you have a dry sound, you can add a lot in the mixer to it, so that it sounds more unique than just a sound from, let's say, Serum or Nexus that's already finished. So in my opinion, dry sounds are the best. Yeah, what I did was, for distortion, I put Camel Fat on it, and this is a great plugin, but I don't think it exists anymore. At least I can't find it anymore. You have something else, it's called Camel Crusher, but this is Camel Fat, and in my opinion Camel Fat is way better than Camel Crusher. So Soundgradizer, as always. Guys, if you don't use Soundgradizer on your lead, there's something wrong with you. And I feel sorry for all you Logic and Ableton guys, because you're missing out on Soundgradizer. Soundgradizer! So with all the stuff on it, it sounds something like this. And if you compare it with an empty mix, yeah, it's just a dry sound. But like I said, dry sounds are the best to personalize and make you more of a unique sound. But to give the sound more of an Arabic vibe, I added another lead. Yeah, if you hear it like that, it doesn't sound special at all. But if you add it with the other lead, it gives more of an Arabic vibe to it. So this is without. This is with the layer. Without. And with. Yeah, as you can hear, it sounds more Arabic. It's pretty dry, but like I said, dry sounds are the best to use for layering. So the next thing I did to make the drop and the melody more interesting was add your typical dubstep growls and wobbles and stuff. So on the first beat of the track we got this one. That's a typical dubstep growl. And if you listen to the original Candy Shop, let's take the original Candy Shop here. Like Scott Storch used this low violin on the first beat, and I wanted to replace that with a dubstep growl just to make it more trappy. So that's what I did over here. Like I said, I used some wobbles, some simple dubstep Skrillex sounds. Yeah, and if you add those sounds together, it gives the drop more of a trap feel to it. So let's take a listen with all the wobbles and growls and stuff. The next thing I did was make the drums. And the drums are pretty simple. I began with a typical trap pattern. So it sounds something like this. So I always love to work with a dry kick and later add an 808 to it. So not an 808 that already has a top kick on it, but I like to use a dry kick as my top kick. We have the dry kick. Sounds pretty straightforward. The only thing I put on the dry kick was a bit crusher, just to make the kick more aggressive. The next thing I did was a simple clap. I think it's a clap snare, just your typical clap snare. But to make the clap snare more interesting, I added this cymatics percussion with a lot of reverb to it. And to top it off, we're going to take a look at the original Candy Shop. What Scott Storch did was he used this tom drum right before the clap. So if we take a listen at the original.
Yeah.
So boom, I'm not sure what the fuck I'm doing. So if you're listening correctly, you'll hear a tom drum right before the clap, and that's an element I wanted to put in this remix as well, so people can recognize it more as Candy Shop. So let's take a listen with the tom drum right before the clap. So like I said, Scott Storch used this as well in the original Candy Shop, and I thought it was dope to use it here as well. It gives the track more style, more rhythm, plus somewhere subconscious you'll recognize the original Candy Shop in it. And I thought that was pretty dope. So the next thing I did was the 808, and a lot of people ask me, what do you use for 808s? Do you use VSTs? Do you use samples? And I'm a big fan of using samples as my 808s, because first, samples in Fruity Loops are easier to manipulate. So let's say they're easier to pitch bend and stuff. And I think if you use samples have like a more raw edge to them. They sound more raw than something straight out of VST. I think an 808 bass from a VST sounds just too clean. But in my opinion, I want my tracks to sound dirty, to sound raw. That's why I use samples, because I think they have like this raw edge to them. And of course, when I'm looking for 808 samples, I try to find the cleanest 808 samples possible so I can manipulate them more in the mix. Yeah, let's take a look at the 808 I used over here. Okay, and as you may notice, on the first beat, it doesn't have an 808, and that's because it's a pretty typical trap thing, and I do this a lot in my tracks, to not have an 808 bass on the first beat. And I noticed that when I'm playing my music live, it gives more of a surprise element to your track. It's some kind of an anticlimax, so there's a huge climax in the build-up, and suddenly there's no bass, and people are like, okay, what the hell's going on? And then suddenly the bass hits. It's like a surprise element, and in my opinion, if you use that element in your tracks, then the bass will hit harder in your face. Yeah, if we combine that with the sounds we already made, that sounds something like this. And for the second part of the drop, as a variation, I just put in these hi-hats. And as you can hear, I also made a variation in the drop lead. And this is a very common thing I do in my tracks. What I did was I just took the regular drop lead and just pitched it down an octave, so 12 semitones. Yeah, that's what I did as a variation in the drop lead. Okay, so after this part, the track goes into a Moombahton switch. And this is also something I use a lot in my tracks. It's just to do a genre switch. So it doesn't always have to be Moombahton, but it's mostly Moombahton in my tracks, but I also like to use a psytrance switch or a hardstyle switch. Yeah, it's a pretty signature thing of me to always use some kind of genre switch in my tracks, but mostly it's Moombahton because I also produce Moombahton. So yeah, let's take a look at the switch. Okay, for the Moombahton drop, as you heard, I just used the same melody again, but with a Moombahton variation in the drums. So if we take a look at the drums, the kick is just a typical 4 on the floor pattern, combined with the typical Moombahton pattern. Okay, and let's break down the Moombahton pattern. So what we have is your typical bubbling snare. Yeah, but this snare, this is a pretty overused snare, especially here in the Netherlands with all the Moombahton and urban stuff going on. So to make this more interesting, layer that shit. I just layered this bundling snare with a simple percussion wood. And if you listen to it, so this is without, and this is with. It makes the sound just a bit more interesting. Just to top it off, I added another sound. Yeah, this is a sound I thought it sounded pretty dope. And I did this little pitch bend over here. Okay, together with that we have this typical Moombahton percussion. This is like this tambourine sound. I also switched up the bass because in my opinion the bass always needs to follow the kick, and since the kick is now a 4 on the floor pattern, I also switched up the bass. Oh shit. Fucking hell. Okay, fellas. If you combine that together with all the sounds I used, then you have your typical Moombahton drop. Okay, let's talk about the cough. So I made this track before Corona. It was pre-Corona actually. I just thought the cough would sound pretty dope as a variation in this track because I used the dubstep growls and wobbles on the first beat as a variation. I thought a random cough would sound pretty dope. Next time I'm going to sample that one. Yeah, I think it's important just to switch up your track sometimes by using random sounds and maybe have a chance that they go viral. So you also need to think about that aspect in your tracks. So after the Moombahton switch, it goes back to the trap. And funny thing is, that's actually me. I recorded this on my iPhone. And this is a sound I think I always use in my tracks. And like I said, it's just to create that recognizability. Is that a word? Just so that people will recognize your tracks more if you keep using the same sound subtle. And that vocal cut is also one of them. Before we go to talk about the break, let's talk about the build-up. So the build-up is pretty straightforward. It's just the acapella and with some added effects, so your typical riser, long sweep and stuff. So let's take a look at the build-up.
Candy shop, I let you lick the lollipop. Go ahead, girl, don't you stop. Keep going till you hit the spot. Whoa.
Okay, so over here I just looped the acapella and pitched it down like 12 semitones an octave, so it goes towards the drop vocal. And I added some typical snare rolls to them, added a kick.
Undercover on the beat, so twerk it, bitch.
Okay, so let's talk about the undercover on the beat, so twerk it bitch vocal. It's actually done by a friend of mine called Bookshe. She did a pretty good job on it, and it's actually my signature vocal. I use it in every single undercover track. I started using it because I was afraid that people wouldn't know how to pronounce undercover because it's written in a Dutch way. So I just created a drop vocal where it said undercover so people would know how to pronounce it. And the funny thing is, it actually worked because people now know how to pronounce undercover and they even know that tag. And that's my signature tag I use in every track. And then I combined it with a drop fill. And my vocal is also something I always use in my tracks. And I actually recorded this one on my iPhone as well. And I pitched it, I just pitched it up a bit.
like.
So then we're going to take a look at the break. So the funny thing is, for this break I wanted to do a Moombahton dancehall break instead of your typical trap or EDM break, because I already used a Moombahton switch and I thought it would sound pretty dope in the track. So let's take a listen to it.
You can have it your way. How do you want it? You gon' back that thing up or should I push up on it? Temperature rising, okay, let's go to the next level. Dance floor jam packed, hot as a tea kettle. I break it down for you now, baby, it's simple.
Okay, let's break it down. So the first thing I did was use a dirty hi-hat from Cashmere Pack to create this Moombahton rhythm. Yeah, and I combined this with just the drop 808, but then with a filter on it, so that it has less bass and it sounds more on the background instead of the foreground. So that sounds something like this. To fill the break up more, I used this as a, I think it's some kind of vocal. And again, I use the filter on it to put it more on the background instead of the foreground, because in the break I want everything to be on the background and then it works towards the drop where everything hits you in the face. Then I put in the flute again with the original Candy Shop melody.
Break it down for you now, baby, it's simple. If you be an info, I'll be an info. In the hotel or in the back of the rental, on the beach or in the park, it's whatever you into. Got the magic stick.
The second part of the break, I removed the filter from the 808 bass, so you have the full 808 bass again. And I just added some kicks in a dancehall pattern with a clap, just to give the break more variation. So then it goes to a build up again. Okay, and the funny thing, what I did over here was I used turn down for what snare pattern. That's this one. It's not exactly the same as turn down for what, but I think a lot of people recognize this one from the turn down for what build up. And I did this because it's a bit of a nod to my turn down for what remix that has like over 100 million views and exploded. So it's a bit, yeah, it's a nod to my turn down for what remix. So I thought it would fit pretty dope in this one. Yeah, for the second drop, it's just a variation on the original melody, but then with a different sound. So let's take a look at that sound. Yeah, it's a very dirty dubstep, Skrillex kind of screeching sound, and I kept it pretty simple. I just kept the same melody, but then with some added notes. Yeah, and then for the second part of the second drop, it switches back to the original sound, but then 2 octaves lower. You cannot do that with every sound you have, but with this particular synth, it sounded pretty dope and pretty aggressive to put in the drop. So. So if you guys enjoyed this video and want me to do more tutorials in the future, drop a like, drop a comment, make sure to subscribe and share this with all your friends and family and your pets and your neighbors and everything. If you have any other ideas for future videos, then drop them down in the comments below. Yeah, just let me know what you thought of the video and if you have any ideas for future videos. So thanks for watching and I'll see you very soon in the next video. Peace.